15 years ago, I was sitting down with a client, and it's a fairly large government client in the healthcare space. I did a lot of work with smoking cessation, alcohol awareness, and drug addiction. And they're a health authority, and they're spread out over 200 square miles. And I was going from office to office over a couple days and having meetings and conversations about different projects. And at the end of the second day, I'm in my third meeting, and I'm sitting there listening to this, and I'm talking to these people. I'm going, do you know these different people that work within your authority? And there's 20,000 employees. They said, no. How about these people? No. Well, you guys basically all do similar things. And each and every single one of them was looking to create a project at that particular point in time. And the three projects were able to dovetail into each other. Now, I was able to get all three of them on a conference call, set up a meeting, get them to actually meet each other. And we sat down and we came up with a program that worked for all three projects. And what we were able to do was combine three different budgets of $40,000 to $50,000 each into a $150,000 budget, get something that was going to be able to make them all successful. And at the end, we actually did it for about $120,000 or $125,000. So we saved the organization $25,000 by enabling people to talk to each other. And that's the problem. The amount of waste every single year in the United States, in Canada, around the world through ineffective internal communication is staggering. We're talking $37 billion a year. For organizations of 100,000 employees, that's $62 million a year. If you take a look at a smaller organization like 100 employees, you're only talking $420,000 a year. For a small organization, that's staggering. That could be the difference between being profitable and not profitable. And these are after-tax dollars. And the problem is there are so many opportunities where companies waste an enormous amount of time because the left hand doesn't speak to the right hand. Nobody understands what other people are doing. They duplicate things, they make mistakes, they assume things that aren't true, and go ahead with projects that haven't been signed off. And millions of dollars and billions of dollars are wasted every single year because of ineffective internal communication. So the most important thing to communicate is to hear what isn't being said. Drucker. We don't hear each other. We may say things. We may post things. It may go up on the wiki. It may go in the Slack channel. It may go, make an announcement. But do people hear it? Do people hear it? Do they listen? Do they understand what is important to them? Do they understand what they're supposed to do? And are they compelled to engage? And that's the big problem in the world today, is that we're not communicating to hear. We're not communicating to make sure that people understand. We assume that everybody understands things exactly the same way we do. We assume that everybody understands what the brand is. We assume everybody understands what the goals, the mission, the vision, the values are. They believe in them. And that everybody knows what they're supposed to do moving forward. Well, we all know that's not true. We all know that from the minute an employee is brought on and they go through that initial inception, they might have a couple days of training on the brand and awareness and be able to have some type of induction in the company. That might be the only real conversation that they ever have one-on-one or one to few on what the mission, vision, and values of the company truly are. And if that is the only time that they ever get that information, things get missed and things get lost and things get forgotten. And because of that, internal communication breaks down and people lose millions, if not billions of dollars. The more elaborate our communication, the less we communicate. As I said before, the Slack, the wiki, the email, the tweets, the text messaging, things get lost. Where did we find that information? Where did people send us this information? Did they send us the information? Did we save it? Did we save it somewhere that was relevant? Do we know how to access it? Do we remember it? These are things that a lot of people look at and they sit there and say the answer is no. We sit there and go, hey, listen, what do we do? How do we get this information? Where's the one central repository where we can go to find out what the latest information is? What is the thing that I need to know when I need to know it and be able to have it at my fingertips so that it's relevant, I can understand it, and I can move forward with it? And that is the challenges that most organizations in today's world, they're just throwing technology at things. They're just saying, okay, if we create a better CRM, if we put a wiki on there, if we create a Slack channel, everybody will go there and they'll know what to do. And then that Slack channel gets fuller and fuller and fuller, and 10,000 people are on one Slack channel. Things don't get segmented properly, and information gets lost. We are not listening to our people and enabling them to listen to each other. It's really that simple. Within organizations, we're not fostering that ability to communicate. We're not putting ourselves in a position where people are talked to, they're talked at. As leaders, as organizations, as people with different departments, we're talking at people, we're not talking to them. We're not making sure that they're actually listening. We're not making sure that they actually understand. We're not making sure that they know what they need to do. And because of that ineffectiveness, they don't understand what are the important goals. What are we really trying to achieve? What are the things that we need to do in order to be successful? And that are the things that we work on. Because by having that miscommunication, we're causing frustration. We're causing mistrust. We have financial challenges and the Great Resignation. In the last quarter of 2021, 12.4 million people approximately quit their jobs. And they didn't quit their jobs because they were looking for more money. They quit their jobs because in a lot of places, they were frustrated with where they were. They didn't understand the mission. They didn't understand the vision. They didn't understand why they belonged. They didn't believe in what the company was trying to do, or they didn't understand what the company was trying to do. They felt that they were working in a vacuum. They didn't feel that they were cared for and that they mattered. And when we do that, when we put people in a position where they're doing that, they're going to leave us. And every employee that leaves you could cost you up to $100,000 to replace. This is expensive. This is frustrating. This leads to more training. This leads to HR spending the time that they should be doing, spending training and their budget, making the departments better and people better, just backfilling in holes that shouldn't be filled, need to be filled in the first place. We're putting ourselves in a position where we're shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, and we need to do better. Now, what we need to do is we need to find ways to align people with our vision, mission, and goals. And as Joe alluded to, there's a couple different ways that we do this. The first is internally, and that leads to an internal podcast. And internal podcasts need to be secure. They need to be behind closed doors. They need to be in a place where people can talk amongst themselves and to each other and understand in the voice of the person who's actually, running the project, what is actually happening without worrying about, is that information going to be shared outside the company? They need to make sure that the podcast is done asynchronously, because when you're over different time zones, different states, different departments and stuff like that, people don't have time to go to an all meeting and be able to listen to it all at the same time zone in the same place. It needs to be when people are convenient. And when you can put that series of information in one place where people can listen to it in the voice of the person that is actually running the project, and have somebody professionally talking to them and say, what are the challenges? What are we working on? Why are we doing this? How is this helping the company move forward? What are the things that you need for other departments to be able to make this secure and to make this work? We become better aligned. And that is a big thing about what we do. We work with companies and we do the strategy. We actually build the podcast. We host it for them. We have the internal secure podcast platform. And we give them also a bunch of content that can be utilized for their training. It can go to their marketing department. Their marketing department can take that information that's not secure, the stuff that can be let out, and be able to turn that into, you know, hundreds, if not thousands, of pieces of content. And it allows us to be able to move forward as companies. The other part of the business is creating an external podcast. Now, those external podcasts, most companies, quite honestly, don't need a week after week external podcast. They need information and content that they can send out on a regular basis that gives ideas for their clients of how their clients can benefit. And that could just be a mini podcast of 12 to 15 weeks. It could be, once a month type thing. It could be twice a month. It could be a once a week type situation. But it's a matter of understanding, what do you need? What do your clients need? And how is this going to benefit them? And with that, what we do is we take those podcasts and we turn each episode into 25 pieces of information. And that information can be, shorter videos. It can be audiograms. It can be images. It can be tweets. It can be posts. It can be white papers. There are all sorts of things that information can come out of that podcast that can be either used internally for training and understanding mission, vision, and value, or can be used externally to be able to market to your community and to be able to provide them with information that enables them to know, like, and trust you, and to be able to make better, more informed decisions and to differentiate your brand from your competitors. So those are the two things that we do for companies. And that's how we help them survive and thrive. And the questions I have for you is, how can this help your clients succeed? And I'm happy to take things in the chat, and I'm happy to take live conversations. And I want to explore this with people and sit there and say, what are the things that you're looking for to be able to, help your clients communicate more effectively and enable them to be better at what they do?
Ben, while everybody's thinking of some questions to add into chat, I had one that came off the top of my head, and it's around the internal podcasting.
Yeah.
How do you keep that secure environment so people feel open enough to talk without thinking, oh my gosh, this is going to get outside these walls?
There is a platform that we use that's all they do. This doesn't go onto Spotify. It doesn't go onto iHeart. It doesn't go into Apple. It goes into a secure stream-only podcast that you have to be invited onto this channel. And, your access can be given and taken away through a central person or a central team that have access to it. And you have access to that while you're working for the company, or while they give access to you, either on your desktop or on your phone on an Apple or an Android device. But it's stream only. It can't be reproduced, and it can't be copied. So it is strictly, that's what it's designed for, and that's what their IP is. And we partner with them. The companies that we work with, we enable them to deal directly with the IP provider. They control all the horizontal, the vertical, everything. We just do the podcasting and then load it onto this platform to make sure that there's never any issues.
Interesting. Okay. Janet asked a question. Do you know, Janet, do you want to ask your question? I'll let you.
Oh, sure. One of the things I've noticed doing communications at some of my clients is, what percentage of people actually will open an email or open a newsletter and take a look at it. I was wondering I don't know, I might call it the listen rate for podcasts if they're distributed out within something broader than a small team, if you're distributing it a bit further internally.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about it is this platform has statistics. So who's opening it, who's not opening it, how long they're listening it to, which episodes they listen to, what episodes they don't, did they share it amongst people within their team. You have access to all that information to be able to look at. And a lot of it comes down to the organization itself and how is it promoted, how is it utilized, because it's not just the podcast, it's being able to sit there and say, okay, we did this podcast, and then having the team leader be able to sit there and say, okay, how does this work with our team? Now that and be able to reference those podcast episodes and to sit there and say, all right, we're working on this project. We just had an internal brief by so and so on this. What do people think about this, and how is this going to be able to affect us? So it's enabling the team leaders to be able to foster the communication of the podcast within their teams itself, and within different teams as they interact with each other.
Amanda posted a question here about the difference between listening to respond and listening to understand, and how it's such a critical skill to learn. Are there exercises and tools that you lead teams through to help learn how to listen to understand versus simply to respond?
Yeah, I mean, when a lot of it when I was doing this live, it was interesting to do it in small groups, and you start off by getting people to tell each other stories, and you get them to interview each other for 5 minutes about their lives, about things that are personal to them, something that's interesting to them, something that's that's different, and then you have to stand up and be able to tell the story of somebody else's life. And that's a really interesting way to find out what were the things that they focused on as a listener. Did they get everything? And then you can sit there and grab somebody from the audience and say, okay, you just listened to these two people tell the biographies of each other. I want you to tell the story of so-and-so. And just get some random person out of the audience to be able to sit there and say, what did you remember from this story? And if you can do that and bring more people into that engagement and be able to enable them to tell each other's stories and listen to each other and be able to move forward that way, you tend to get people to understand a little bit more about how to engage.
Great. Bill, you had a question. You want to ask it?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah. So when you're starting a project with a client, how do you engage them? Are they telling you what their key points are, or do you help them develop that? Like, where are they in the maturity model in terms of their internal communications? And then also, are you dealing with the HR people, the marketing people, or none of the above?
To start from the end and work my way back, I tend to deal with HR, I tend to deal with sales, I tend to deal with C-suite. People come to me for a couple different reasons. One, they're losing people. Two, they're losing sales. And the three, there's a lot of waste within the company. I.e., that you're sitting there seeing a lot of mistakes happening within the organization. A lot of it depends on what the challenge is that they're coming to me as. A lot of it comes down to not understanding mission, vision, value, not understanding brand, not understanding values, etc. And we'll run them through a series of different programs to be able to sit there and say, okay, where are we? Do people understand what you do as a company? A guy that I know, I had him on my podcast about 6 or 8 weeks ago, sold his company to ADP. And when they sold his company to ADP went out to 70 different employees and said, what do you guys do as an organization? They had 40 different responses. There was 40 different responses about what they did, and some of them weren't even close. So if you sit there and realize that if you go out to 70 people and 40 people can't tell you what you do, why you do it, who you do it for, and why those people should care, that's a good place to start. And then we start having the conversations with C-suite about what are our goals, what are the short-term goals, what are the long-term goals, what do they see the challenges are. And then what we'll do is we'll work with the various teams to find out what the C-suite sees the challenges are. Are those the same things that the people on the floors are seeing as well? And be able to try to bring that all into alignment.
Great. Mark had a question for you, Ben.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Ben. Thanks. This is really cool. I never really quite knew what your business is, and I love the idea. I can see how useful it would be. And, the internal communications problems that you describe are, they all ring true to me. One question I had was, if you're doing a podcast, and I can see the advantages of that, like you're putting it in one place that people can access, but if people are viewing it asynchronously, like how would they interact with it to ask questions, to get clarifications? Um, how does that piece of it work?
The software has the ability to be able to communicate with other people. So you have the ability to post questions that the people that were on the podcast can listen to, and they can
Okay.
they can do it, and then there's ability to respond. So there is the ability to have a chat function and be able to have communications around that same issue within the software.
But it's so. Are you posting? Are you live streaming these podcasts, or are they pre-recorded?
They're pre-recorded.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering because the one thing missing of that is the live interaction.
Correct.
Is there a way to?
There is a way to live stream it.
Make up.
There is a way to live stream it. If I find that a lot of organizations don't want to live stream it because it's the schedules just don't allow it. They don't allow it for everybody to be there at 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday.
Yeah.
To do that. So even to record it, never mind to listen to it, just to be there to record. Because you have people on various time zones around the world or whatever. They find that the pre-recorded tends to be a lot easier, both for for recording and also for to allow people to listen where it's beneficial to them.
That makes sense. And are you getting feedback, or is there evidence that people are understanding these messages better? And like how do you measure that?
And what we do is we get them to do surveys before, during, and after to be able to sit there and say, okay, what are the main questions that the leadership is wanting to have answered. We get the professionals to create a survey before, to get a line in the sand to see where we are, during, and then maybe 6 months after, to sit there and say, okay, where's the change been?
Mm-hmm.
Great. We got time for one more question from Ron. And then while Ron's asking his question and Ben's answering, think about your takeaways from Ben's talk today. And we'll do a quick check-in on a couple of you to see some of the key takeaways. So go ahead, Ron.
Thank you. Ben, what's the ideal size for an organization where this is most effective? Right, because if you have an organization of 20 people, right, I would look around and go, hey, 20 people, and the leadership needs a podcast to get to get everybody on the same page. I don't think so. So what do you think?
You're probably looking at companies that are probably 1,000 people and above. Is the organizations that we're probably looking at that are going to most benefit it. Either that, you could do it as little as 500 employees if you have a very diversified force. Like if you have got 25 different satellite offices with 10 people in each office, that makes a lot of sense too. But if you're dealing with centralized offices, you're probably looking at somewhere where 1,000 employees would be something that you should be looking at.
Let me follow up. What do you recommend for companies that are large enough to have like their own TV stations? I came from companies that have their own TV stations, news broadcasts, that type of thing.
Yeah, I applaud all that. To me, it's all about strategy. It's not just having the medium itself. It's what are you doing with it. It's really good to have a 357 Magnum, but if you have no idea how to shoot it, you could hurt yourself far more than you could hurt anybody else. So I take a look at it, sit there and say, what's the strategy? Why are you doing this? What are you looking to achieve? Are you getting the results that you're looking for? And if not, what do we do to fix that? So it's having that internal television station or radio station or whatever are really good things. The question is, are you gaining the information that you want by doing what you're doing? And what are you doing with that information once you have it? Are you actually acting on, like when you see holes in the dike, do you actually have people that are listening and actually sitting there going, okay, we have to fix this, and are working to fix it?
Okay, thanks, Ben.
Yep.
As a thank you, we always like to get a few takeaways, people that have heard something that was an aha or an insight or something they want to share. So if you've got something, raise your hand on the screen. I'll call you out while we're thinking about who might have something to say. I just want to say my takeaway is it's really interesting how you've taken a traditional marketing tool like podcasting that's kind of becoming a crowded space as a business,
Mm-hmm.
and you pivoted to focus inwardly within an organization. I think that was very, very interesting approach. I'm going to call on Mo. Mo, do you have a good takeaway for Ben?
I do. I was actually thinking about this whole scenario, and it made me think about how communication is getting more and more just crowded. As you were saying, Joe, it's not just the podcast, it's the LinkedIn and everywhere else. It's like too much information. Every time I go onto LinkedIn, it's something new, something just like overwhelming. And I feel like a lot of times when I'm sharing things, it's not really even being fully understood. So I found that part very resonating. And I think that at a space where a company is 1,000 or above in terms of employee numbers, I think it's very useful to do this sort of exercises, not even potentially as a podcast, but just the idea of just doing something with each other and sharing the messages for that each other understand, I think is very useful. So thank you, Ben, for sharing your message today. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Mo.
Great. Can we get one more takeaway? Mark, I always rely on you to have something to say.
Well, I am raising my hand, but unless somebody else wants to go.
Oh, you're up.
All right. So yeah, I just think this is really cool. Especially there's the strategic component. So it's like outsourced strategic corporations, but platform sounds like you're teaming up. You're doing the survey work to actually find out what are people not getting and what do they need to hear. And then you're kind of coaching or leading or guiding or interviewing, I guess, the speaker to make sure that they hit on all those points. I think that's an extremely valuable. And then you've got this delivery mechanism where they can find that information. It doesn't go away after the presentation. So I think that's really smart. And I can see that being a very useful tool, especially for probably mid to larger companies, as you said.
Mm-hmm.